Hey everybody, it's your boy Nerdicane coming at you again. Doing a video on Star Wars today, which is a subject near and dear to my heart. I want to get this out of the way. I'm trying to reach 1,000 followers, 1,000 subscribers this year so I can get monetized, make a little bit of money off of these things. So if you like this, hit a like, subscribe, and share, please. It really helps me out. Today's subject, we're going to talk about Star Wars, and we're going to talk about Star Wars toys. I absolutely love Star Wars toys. Back when I was a kid, you had He-Man, you had Thundercats, you had G.I. Joe, but there was really in the ranking of the pantheon of kids' toys, Star Wars was far and away my absolute favorite. I still, to this day, have my original Rancor monster. I remember opening a B-Wing on Christmas morning, and the B-Wing was just amazing. It was an enormous toy. It had sound effects, and it had wings that opened up, and the flight control was on a gyroscope, so no matter what way you turned the B-Wing, the pilot was always right side up. It was an amazing toy. And when I got out of the military and I got back to Atlanta, I even had my quote-unquote collector phase where I was collecting action figures, and it was kind of facilitated. My sister had a job at Toys R Us at the time, so we got them at a discount. So I had a pretty impressive collection. I sold it, and I think I made a little bit of money off of it. But lately, in these getting to today, there's been a lot of talk about Star Wars toy sales, and they've been very slow. And in the description, I'm going to put a few articles backing up these numbers. So if you want to see the numbers, go look at those articles. And these are from like Bloomberg, LA Times. These are from like real journalistic outlets, not some trash site like Bleeding Cool or CBR, something like that. No, this is the numbers are bleak. Hasbro stocks have fallen as much as 3.6%, and Mattel stock has fallen 2.2%. Now, those are the two main producers of Star Wars toys. Disney Consumer Products, which you don't really know that you're buying Disney Consumer Products, but that's the consumer products division of Walt Disney. They do the toys and things like that, basically across the board. Their products have fallen 13% in the fiscal year 2017. The death of Toys R Us really didn't help it, but there are still outlets. You can still buy it at a Walmart. You can still buy it at a Target. I assume you can buy it at a Walmart. I haven't been to a Walmart in like 5 years. But you can still buy these toys at other places. So I really don't think Toys R Us was really that big of a factor in it. I'm sure it didn't help because they were one of the larger retailers in America. But when you get to possible factors, and I've watched a lot of other people's videos, and I've watched a lot of review videos of The Last Jedi, one thing that gets pointed back to very often is feminism. The prevalence of feminism in this Last Jedi movie, which is debatable. I think there is a little bit of it, but I think to a kid who just wants to play with a toy, I think that's a little above their head. I don't think they understand that. So I don't think that that's a factor in the dropping sales. Now, there may be some validity to the theories that there's been research in the past of boys don't like to play with girl action figures. In classic lines like G.I. Joe and Thundercats and He-Man, there were women in those lines as action figures, but they never really sold that well in the 80s, which is why to collectors nowadays, those figures are very, very valuable, because there just weren't many of them sold or made. I think that it points a little bit back to the thing that boys and girls play differently, and there's been research in that. There's been a lot of market research as far as toys, because toy companies, they're not agenda driven. They just want to sell toys, so they want to know what kids want to play with. So, like, one of the articles that I'll put in the description said that Barbie tried to market a house. Who makes Barbie? Mattel tried to market a dollhouse to both boys and girls, and the girls would play with a dollhouse the traditional way, boys would like catapult things off of the roof, and they played very differently. And I think that stands. I think it's very evident that boys and girls play differently. So I don't think that really had any much to do with it. Now, Force Friday was an event in 2015 where the new toys came out, and I think Force Friday proved that there is still a market for these toys for collectors and kids playing with. Because if I remember that event, and it was absolutely massive. It was just like the stores were full 1 minute, and then they were empty, and they were empty for weeks afterwards. So I think Force Friday proved that there is a lack of, or not a lack, there is still a demand for that. Kids still do want to play for that. So let me get to the point. I really think, what if the problem isn't fatigue, isn't fan fatigue, isn't things like that, isn't feminism? What if it's inspiration? If you look at the old movies, the old Star Wars movies, from a certain point of view, you could say that they were built to inspire play. They were almost 2-hour-long toy commercials, which, if you remember the 80s, if you watch old 80s cartoons, like 80s cartoons were basically 22-minute toy commercials, and we liked it. We really liked it. So you think about going back to inspiration of play, what in The Last Jedi inspired play? You start the movie on Poe's attack, which was great. That was great adventure. That was excellent. But then it was immediately followed by this just horribly dark suicide run of the bombers, where nobody survived. And then when Poe gets back to the base, he's admonished and demoted for it. Thinking of desperate battles, I think of the Battle of Yavin 4, where they lost a lot of fighters, but that was a heroic play moment that inspired play. After the whole Poe Dameron incident, basically the movie just kind of grinds down into this death march across the system. They can't go to hyperspace. They're being tracked. And it just becomes this slow march where they're just getting bombarded across the galaxy, across that system. In the middle of that, Finn does the heroic thing of trying to escape the ship, trying to abandon ship, and is quickly captured by what's her name, Rose Tico, who's really did the whole character really did nothing to inspire play, which, pointing back to a little more evidence of, boys don't like to play with female action figures. In a lot of the stores that I've been to, Targets and Toys R Us, there's always Rose Tico, General Leia is those figures, and Admiral Holdo. Those figures are always still on the shelves. Nothing against Carrie Fisher. She was a great personality, and she was a great star in her own right. But, these characters, those three characters, really did nothing to inspire play. They did really nothing to inspire heroism. Now, Leia in Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope, very different back then. Then, getting back to the story, what's next? You go to Canto Bight and you see the callous opulence of Canto Bight, which really doesn't inspire anything in any play in kids. On Canto Bight, you see the slave kids, and then you see the racing animals being beaten. I mean, imagine what kind of playset that would make. That doesn't do anything to inspire play in kids. The one really redeeming part was the lightsaber fight in Throne Room. But when you really look at it, it's not like any other lightsaber fight in Star Wars. It's very dark and it's very brutal, and it almost feels it feels more like a bloody samurai fight. Like if you've ever watched Ron, or if you've ever watched, especially I point to the samurai fights in Yojimbo. If you ever watch those are very dark. Those are very final. And that's sort of what the fight in that throne room felt like. It didn't feel like um, Luke versus Vader in Return of the Jedi. It didn't feel like Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Count Dooku in Revenge of the Sith. It didn't feel. It felt different. It felt deadly. It felt brutal. It felt dark, which, it works for me. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was a great fight, but I don't think it would. It was a little too heavy-handed for kids if you're getting back to inspiring play. Um, After that battle, we see the rebels, the resistance winds up at the abandoned base, and that whole part of the movie is supposed to echo uh, the Battle of Hoth, which Star Wars is about echoing themes, themes that repeat through the generations, and it really didn't feel like they were hiding. It felt like they were cowering in a corner waiting to die. It felt like there was no escape. While the Hoth battle was desperate and they were fighting something completely overwhelming, it never felt hopeless. Where the Last Jedi fight, even when they broke out of the doors and they were attacking that giant gun, it felt like everyone there knew that was a suicide run, that they had very, very little hope of taking out that gun. And it just, that didn't, there's nothing inspiring, there's nothing fun or heroic about that to inspire play. So really, I think that is the major factor as to why, if you ask me, that's a major factor as to why these the sales of toys, Star Wars toys, are down. Very, I don't know if you can hear that in the background. Little's trying to climb into a box that's full of bubble wrap, so he's making about as much noise as he possibly can with it. That doesn't look comfortable at all. But anyway, getting back to the story, none of that movie really seemed to inspire play. It didn't feel like it was the middle part of a trilogy. It didn't feel like Empire Strikes Back. While Empire Strikes Back was dark and more emotional, there was still the Hoth battle. There was still the chase through the asteroid field. There was still a bit of a fight on Cloud City. None of The Last Jedi had that. It didn't feel that way. It didn't feel fun in any way, really, from the standpoint of a kid who was like, "Hey, I'm worried about feminism. I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried about that. Just show me some cool vehicles, some cool action, inspire my play." And none of that seemed to happen in this movie. So that's my take. That's what I think. That's my take on why I think Star Wars toys have fallen off and the sales are down. I think there is still a market there. Last I checked, there's still little kids running around. So, Star Wars fatigue really doesn't apply to them. It applies to collectors and fans like me. Well, collectors who are still collecting. I don't collect Star Wars toys anymore. But I don't think the fatigue matters to them. I don't think the feminist tones of the movie matters to them, because that's above their head. They're not interested in that. They just want a cool toy to play with. But there was really none of that in The Last Jedi. So I think that's where it fell on its face from a money-making standpoint. And yes, that is an important part, is making money. Just ask George Lucas. He made millions, probably billions on the toys. But that's my take on the decline of Star Wars toys. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'm always open to other ideas. Tell me if I missed anything. As always, you can hit me here. You can hit me on Twitter. I'm Nerdicane. Thank you for watching. I'm closing in on 15 minutes, so I got to cut this off. Have a good day, and thank you once again.